In this story from the Gospel of John, we get a really specific picture that Jesus wants to show us, that this writer wants to paint this picture of what's really going on in Jerusalem with Jesus. And so he says Jesus is by the sheep's gate. There were all these gates around the city of Jerusalem, and that Jesus went into the sheep's gate, and there was a place there that had 5 porticos, these sort of shelters with columns. And archaeologists have actually found this place, that it actually existed, much how it's described in the Gospel of John, with these 5 porticos and these columns. And there was a pool where people went and where people sat and where they waited. They wanted to get in the pool because it was going to make them feel better. And there was a legend that an angel came and stirred up the waters every now and then. Maybe it was a hot spring that was there and stirred up the waters for people to get in and to start to feel better. And I thought, I know what that is. That's a hot tub. Hot tubs go way back. People have been getting in these hot tubs to feel better for thousands of years. Now in America, we think of them as indulgences, right? It was somewhere in the 70s that a hot tub became less about therapy and more about a party, at least in America. But hot tubs have been sources of healing in all of these cultures for thousands of years. I know it sounds strange to us. It sounds a little foreign, but it's true. These people in Jesus' time were waiting to get in the hot tub so that they could feel better. Because we all know that when you get in the hot tub, you feel better, right? I've told you guys that my stepdad, my mom's husband, is Norwegian, and they moved into a new house, and they put in a hot tub, and I said to my mom, wow, fancy, right? And she said, no, for Norwegians, you have to have one. It's not a luxury. It's part of daily life, taking the waters. And we hear that it's been part of life for thousands and thousands of years, that water is going to bring healing to you. In most cultures that aren't ours, in Eastern Europe and in Asia, it's not a luxury to go to a spa. You guys can quote me on that. It's not a luxury to go to a spa. It's part of life. It's part of feeling better when something starts to ail you, to go to one of these spas and feel better. There's one right here in Atlanta. There's a Korean spa over on Buford Highway, and they have all these pools, and they have hot tubs, and they have saunas, and it's amazing and a relatively inexpensive admission price. And I heard about it, and I thought, I'm going to go. And there's signs everywhere telling you what you should and shouldn't do, which is fine. It's wonderful, and it's healing. And there was a sign there that said, don't get in the hot tub unless you are healing. And I thought, what does that mean? I think it was translated, and I think it's supposed to mean, don't get in unless you're healthy. But when I read it, and it said, don't get in unless you are healing, I thought, that reminds me of Jesus. That reminds me of this story that I heard, that we're trying to enter into this healing, and about this man who was trying, it sounds like, to get into this hot tub that was going to cure him of everything that ailed him, right? So this is a strange picture. Jesus is walking down into this. I was saying the subtitle should be Jesus Goes to the Spa. Because Jesus goes into this area that's known for this, for people taking the waters. And so he goes into this area where there are columns, and it's probably very beautiful, and there's a pool there, and there's a lot of people there that are waiting and that are sick. But Jesus picks out this one guy, and he's been there for 38 years. That was the 70s, if it was today. That's how long he's been there. He's been laying there for 38 years, waiting. And so Jesus says to him, do you want to be made well? And I thought, that's a dumb question, Jesus. If you've been laying there on a pallet for 38 years and somebody comes and says to you, do you want to get made well? What do you say? Yes. It's a yes or no question. If somebody comes to you like Jesus, this walking rabbi who comes around and says, do you want to be made well? You don't say, you don't think about it. It's a yes or no question. You say yes. If any of us got asked that question, whatever was ailing us, and for all of us it's something, we'd say yes, right? I feel like I would say, of course, please, right now, go for it. But that's not what this guy says. This guy who's laying on his mat says to Jesus, well, I don't have anybody to take me down to the hot tub and to put me in, and the people, they cut me off. And he starts giving Jesus all these excuses about why he can't get into the pool. Now, last night, I called him a loser. And I think he kind of is. This guy laying on his pallet, he's been laying there, and when Jesus asked him finally, do you want to get well? He gives him his story. He tells him all the excuses of why he can't. Nadia Boltzweber, the awesome tattooed pastor in Colorado, who I've talked about before, she says, I wonder about this man, what the payoff was for him. How did it profit this man to stay sick? She's a recovering addict, and so she said, when I was addicted, it profited me because I could kind of shirk all responsibility. I was very sick, but there was a payoff. And so she said, I wonder what the payoff is for this guy laying on his mat. How is his life better sick instead of well? I wonder if the man had just given up all hope of ever being made well. And so when somebody asks him that, he doesn't even hear the question. It just goes right by him when Jesus asks him this question. And so he starts giving him all these excuses and all these reasons why and all these things. And do you see what Jesus does? Jesus doesn't ask him why. Jesus doesn't ask him to clarify. All Jesus says is, stand up, take up your mat, walk on out of here. And here's the miracle. The guy does it. This guy has been laying on a pallet giving excuses for 38 years. I think the miracle is not so much that he was healed, but that he took his pallet and stood up and walked away from where he'd been living all that time. I think there's a different miracle going on here, and I think it's a miracle that happens to all of us at some point or another. When my husband and I were in seminary, we were getting toward the end of seminary, and we had actually graduated, and there's this thing called the draft, and we're not supposed to call it that, right? But we do. The synods draft you into different places, and you get called, and I think they're not allowed to call it draft day anymore, but we still did. And we all get together, and they tell you where we're going, and it's very exciting, and we heard, we're going to the Atlanta area. So that was really exciting. This is close to home for me, and all of those things. And then it got more into the summer. That was back in the spring. It got into the summer, and we had a few interviews. We hadn't heard anything, and we had talked to the synod a little bit, and then we didn't hear anything. And we're still in Ohio in our seminary house, and we lived in a 100-year-old house, and it didn't have air conditioning because it was Ohio, and it was very hot that summer. So we were hot, and we were tired, and we were cranky, and we were very anxious because we didn't know what was going to happen next. We were in that stage where we were just kind of waiting on something to happen, and that can be the worst place to be. And so we got really frustrated, and we were really mad at kind of this whole process. We were mad at the process. We were mad at the synod. We were mad at the churches. We were kind of mad at everybody, and we were really, really hot. Did I mention that? It was really hot inside our house. We kind of magnified everything. And we went to, I went to one of our really wise professors, and she had some connections here and there. She's the one that assigned the interns to the pastors, and so she had to deal with all of us crazy people all the time. So I think we thought she'd be wise. So we went to her, and we whined for about a half an hour. And we said, Jane, her name was Jane Jenkins. She was amazing. We said, Jane, the synod is not doing anything for us. We haven't heard anything from the churches. And we're blaming everything kind of on everybody else. And it's hot in our apartment. And Jane said something that we still quote. And I quote it often. And we quote it to each other and we quote it to our children. And they're probably going to grow up hating it. But it's good stuff, so I want y'all to hear it. Jane said to us, "You are not powerless in this situation." Let that sink in. You are not powerless in this situation. We thought, what? Yes, we are. There's nothing we can do. She said, yes, you can. You can call the synod every day if you need to until they listen to you. You can call these churches and say, where are you in your process? We were just curious. You can take yourself to Sears and buy yourself a window air conditioning unit with a credit card. It's what they're there for, right? Emergencies. We thought, oh, we weren't powerless in that situation. And I think that was the miracle that Jesus did for this man. Jesus told him, you may be sick. There may be circumstances beyond your control, but you are not powerless in this situation. He told the man, you may be sick, you may be unwell, but that doesn't have to be your identity. You have some power here. You have choices that you can make to change things. We all participate in our own healing, and even though this man, I can't think of someone less worthy of healing than this guy. I can think of a dozen more people that I would put ahead in line of him to be healed. And so we've got to see this as a sign of something else. We've got to see this as a sign that Jesus says to us, you're not powerless in this situation, whatever your situation is. Stand up, take your mat, walk on away. And when Jesus later says to this man, excuse me, don't sin anymore so that nothing's going to get any worse for you. That's not about the man's sin making him sick again. Let's just forget that because we know that Jesus does not operate that way. I think that's because the man had started to blame it on everybody else again. He had started to be powerless again, and when the Pharisees came to him and said, you are breaking the law of the Sabbath. You are not supposed to be carrying your mat on the Sabbath. This guy, he started to blame it on everybody again. Do you hear that? Well, it was this other man told me to do it. He was starting to put the blame on everybody else. He was starting to give up his power instead of saying, celebrate with me. I'm not laying there by the hot tub that I can never get to anymore. He started blaming it again, and I think when Jesus found him, he said, do not commit the sin of thinking you are powerless anymore. Take responsibility for your own self, for your own healing, wherever that might lead you. So I think Jesus says to us, whatever we have that is ailing us, some of us get well, and some of us don't. But none of us are powerless. And the miracle is that Jesus says to all of us, stand up, take up your mat, and walk. And the miracle is that we take that first step. Amen.